Knock Report News Update on now with Simon Webb. Now, you may be wondering who he is, but not all of you. You've probably seen him before. He's kind of getting to be a YouTube superstar, a rock star. Recently, I don't know, I think it was on might have been on Tucker Carlson or on Hannity or Epic Times or a combination. They had a clip of Simon Webb on there, and he's the man who's the author of over 20 nonfiction books, chiefly social history, as well as 40 westerns. Now, get this: Simon is from the United Kingdom. Whereabouts are you from, Simon, in the UK?
Near London, not far from London.
And you write westerns?
Yes, lots and lots of westerns.
You're like 40, right?
Well, probably more than that because they're all in different names, so I have trouble keeping track of them.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, great. You're a prolific writer. He's the author of The Forgotten Slave Trade, The White European Slaves of Islam. Did you get that? The Forgotten Slave Trade, The White European Slaves, let me do this again. The Forgotten Slave Trade, The White European Slaves of Islam. He's also the author of The Suffragette Bombers, Suffragette Fascists, Fighting for the United States and Executed in Britain. That's an amazing story, but we'll have to leave that for another interview. And also British concentration camps, 1900, 1975, and many more. His website is www.simon-webb.com. His book, again, The Forgotten Slave Trade, The White European Slaves of Islam. So, Simon, we live in very strange times, but oftentimes it's necessary to go back and find the forgotten history of things, especially slavery. Give us you're a good writer. Give us a 30-second, story about world slavery, if it's possible.
Slavery is one of those practices which is common to every continent and every civilization on Earth. It arose spontaneously in Africa and North and South America and Europe and Asia. Somehow or other, we've become fixated on the transatlantic slave trade, and that's why we call that the slave trade, as though it's uniquely terrible or uniquely prolific. It wasn't.
Right. So, okay. So, well, I'm glad you mentioned that. So tell us about, first, the forgotten slave trade, the white European slaves of Islam. How did that happen? Who perpetrated it? Who were the victims? And how long did it last?
It lasted until the Americans put a stop to it. Oddly enough, we have the Americans to thank for that. It was,
Yay!
Exactly. You probably know the battle hymn of the Marines, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. That was the
Yes, and the son is a Marine.
Yeah, that's when they landed in Tripoli to put an end to the Muslim slave trade there, because what happened was that North Africa was largely occupied by Turks, by the Turkish Empire, and they needed lots and lots of slaves. And they could either go across the Sahara and bring them from sub-Saharan Africa, which was difficult, or they could just sail across the Mediterranean into the English Channel and raid Europe for slaves. And that was the easiest way of doing it. And all this took place, when we think about the African slave trade, we imagine that Europeans started it by visiting Africa and taking slaves. It was nothing of the sort. It was ships from Africa, slave trade.
Right, before we get to Simon, before we get to the African slave trade of Negro slaves and all that, tell us a little bit more about the slave trade in which the whites became slaves. Tell us about how long did that go on and how bad was it?
It went on for centuries. It was going on. It began probably around the 8th or 9th century AD. There was a huge demand for slaves in the Middle East amongst the Arab nations. And later on, when they took a lot of the word slave is cognate with the name Slav. A lot of the early slaves were taken from Russia and from Eastern Europe. And then it just became easier to sail off to Italy, Spain, and Britain and raid villages there. This took place from the 16th century onwards. They would simply land, just as the British slavers would go to Africa to take slaves. So the North African slavers from what is now Morocco, Tunisia, and Libya would sail to Italy or France or Spain land, raid a village, and take everybody captive.
Amazing. So this is something. How bad was it in the UK
It was
at
very
this
bad.
time? Give us
It
an
was very
idea.
bad because the Royal Navy couldn't deal with it. In the 17th century, it got to the point where the British fishing fleets couldn't leave waters. If people went out in fishing boats, they were liable to be captured by the slave traders. So a lot of the fishing industry collapsed. These slave traders used to raid, they would land in Cornwall or Devon, which are parts of England, and carry off whole villages.
Right. Well, we have New York, New London, New Britain. These are places in the New World. But you don't have New Baltimore. That's funny. Tell us about how why that is.
Well, there's a village called Baltimore in Ireland. And what happened was that slave traders landed there and they kidnapped the entire village. Everybody in the village of Baltimore, hundreds of people, were taken onto ships and taken off to Africa to be sold into slavery at slave markets.
Basically, they eliminated the town, and when we decided to call, or maybe it was because of Lord Baltimore, I don't know, but in any case, it's kind of strange. This is unexpected. This is like something that people never knew about. How did they? So, who was participating in this slave trade then? Who were the perpetrators?
Arabs from North Africa and also some Turks. The Ottoman Empire ran much of North Africa, so they wanted slaves as well. They needed them both for public works, and they needed a lot of eunuchs. So a lot of the men that were kidnapped from Europe ended up being castrated as slaves.
Lovely. Oh man. Hey, well, so Simon, any estimates on the number of the hundreds
Certainly
of
over a
thousands of
million.
white
Yeah,
European slaves who were carried away?
certainly over a million, but nobody knows for sure because records weren't kept. It got to the point where people living in villages on the coast in Europe would desert the villages and they would move inland because they didn't dare stay on the coast for fear of the slavers.
What other countries were affected by European slavery, the Muslim slavery of Europeans?
Well, Malta, Italy, France, Holland, even as far as Iceland, the slave traders went to Iceland as well. Some quite famous people were slaves of the Arabs. Don Quixote, the author of Don Quixote, Cervantes, he was held as a slave in North Africa for 5 years.
Well, sure. All right. Well, now with that as a backdrop for Black Lives Matter and reparations and what else? White privilege. Tell us about the African slave trade, meaning the trafficking of Africans to the New World. How did that take place? Who did it?
The Africans did it themselves. In Africa, just as in every other continent, there was a very long-standing tradition of slavery. The European ships, slave ships that put in there, couldn't have captured 500 or 600 slaves by themselves. They only had crews of perhaps 40 or 50 sailors on the ship. They couldn't possibly have fought 600 Africans and captured them. What they did was that they carried goods from Britain and manufactured things like gunpowder and muskets and traded them with African rulers who then supplied them with slaves. So it was an African trade as much as it was a European one.
So there are two parts, three parts actually. There's those who catch the slaves, those who sell the slaves, and those who buy the slaves. Tell us about the first two parts then. Who was catching the slaves then? It was different
African rulers. The Europeans came to a deal with some of the African kingdoms in West Africa, people, say Benin, for example, and the deal was that they would bring a huge amount of manufactured goods from Britain and they would trade them for slaves. So the people of Benin would go raiding in Central Africa, bring back slaves from others of their tribes, and sell them in exchange them for the goods from Britain.
So then, sure. So then the people from the UK, America, Spanish colonies where would they go to buy them? They buy them in Africa, West Africa, Nigeria. Whereabouts today?
The slaves were then taken to the Caribbean and the North America. and they were exchanged there for tobacco, cotton, goods like that, yeah, and sugar.
Rum.
And then those goods were taken back to England and exchanged for manufactured goods. That's why it's called the triangular trade.
Of course, of course. So then the $1 million question is reparations. Who gets charged?
You do, the taxpayers do.
Right. But who should get charged?
Nobody. The thing is a nonsense.
Yeah.
Because you're all white people. My family are very working class white people. All my ancestors worked in factories and building sites and they laboured. All their labour went to make other people rich. I'm not entitled to reparations. I can't say because my great grandfather worked and made a factory owner rich. I can't demand money from the government for that.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny, Simon, that when we were in grade school, they taught us that there were also indentured servants, and they were de facto slaves.
Sure.
They were white.
That's right. Yeah.
They won passage to places like, I don't know, New York, Massachusetts Bay Colony, and Virginia, wherever, the American colonies, and they needed laborers too, and so they were indentured, which meant that they had to pay, I don't know how many years, 10 years. It was like going to the moon. It was expensive to go to the New World.
Well, that's
So,
right.
So then we have, I mean, I'm being facetious. I don't think anybody should pay for it, but my point is that they're coming after us. I never owned slaves. You never owned slaves.
No.
The people from BLM were never slaves.
No. It'll be the taxes that pay for it. It will be white people's taxes. And imagine what this will do for race relations in the United States. One figure that's been suggested.
Oh, it'd be so good, so positive.
Yeah, imagine you're living next door to a black family, you're a poor white family, and suddenly they get $1 million for doing nothing, and you're still left in poverty. It's not going to make you feel good about black people.
Oh, sure, yeah. And it doesn't reinforce notions of shiftlessness, being parasitical, not pulling their weight, not doing their part, becoming basically, as far as like their work skills, undesirable for hire, etc. Right. So the whole thing about the reparations scam is that it's all about, in my opinion, all about subjecting whites to humiliation, to empower economically blacks, and it's a proposal for fools to take. But many whites they think they should really get on board, right? Yeah. So anyway, we look at the situation in Britain. Black Lives Matter has made inroads there, right? Tell us about the situation of race relations in the United Kingdom since George Floyd was killed, or maybe Michael Ferguson. I don't know when it started to really rear its ugly head in the UK, but tell us how bad it is in the UK and how pervasive this mentality is.
It's very divisive, and it's getting worse because constantly now we're being told about white privilege, and an awful lot of working class white people, ordinary workers, are getting sick to death of it. They don't have any privilege. A lot of them are struggling to get by financially. They don't understand why they're being criticized and made to feel guilty. Their ancestors weren't rich. They weren't slave owners. They weren't capitalists.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this really makes me laugh. My something you don't know about me. I have a large family. I have 6 kids. So I went to a Jesuit school in Massachusetts, and my sister was married to somebody from the UK. They adopted someone, and a girl. And so they were paying, she graduated, like $60,000 a year, and pretty well-to-do people. And so my sister says to me, and this is my college, she said, "Billy, you got to send your kids to Holy Cross. I mean, it's your college. They'll give them scholarships." And I said, "What do you mean?" "Yeah, they're Hispanics." Because my first wife, may she rest in peace, was Hispanic, so they're mixed race theoretically, and they'll get this great scholarship, they'll get financial aid, they'll get a free ticket, a free ride. I'm like, okay, so if they apply for Caucasians, Where's the privilege? If they apply as Hispanics, they get the red carpet treatment, the champagne,
That's absolutely
free
right.
university training. And meantime, I had to work. You know, uh, waiting on tables, busboy, cleaning apartments. One day we had to clean up after a person that was deceased, and we had to clean up afterwards. Cleaning out old apartments, loading and unloading trucks. Come on, shining shoes. I mean, I don't get the privilege part, man. Simon, this is funny. The $1 million question I have for Simon Webb is: are we stuck on stupid, or is it my imagination?
No, it's not your imagination at all. I see it all the time. A lot of the time, I feel as though I'm dreaming when I see some of the things that are being said. It's like Alice in Wonderland.
Right. Well, okay. So I'm a practical guy, Simon. I look at this and I say, I look at how the United Kingdom stood tall against the Nazis. I mean, they really stood tall. The stories, the heroism, the planes, the courage of the soldiers and the Marines and the Royal Navy. I mean, look at the mosquito bomber. What an incredible creation, made out of wood.
Yeah.
I mean, and so anyhow, we have we have a debt of gratitude to the United Kingdom. My question is that, when will Europeans and Britons and Americans start having more babies? So if we have to fight a war, we will have the men and women to do it, and people with enough fortitude to do so. I sometimes think that these are self-inflicted wounds from university professors that teach us that we should feel bad.
Yeah.
But also because, I mean, it used to be that families in the UK also were large families. They used to have 4 or 5 kids, and same in the United States and Canada. Large families, 6, 7 kids, and all, and that's changed. And now we have a situation where to be able to keep up the consumer demand, we have to import consumers, right? So,
absolutely.
But beyond the basic, the obvious one of having more children, so you don't have to import people from third world countries that just don't understand Western values. What else, based on your knowledge of history, what else can people do to fight this insanity? I mean, you're a historical scholar.
I don't know what they can do, because the current generation of white English people don't seem to be like the people that I remember when I was young myself. They seem to be a bunch of crybabies. Everything is upsetting them. I can't imagine how they would react if they had to fight a war.
Exactly. I mean, the Brits are famous for being tough and not giving an inch.
Not anymore.
Incredible fighters. Fighters, man.
Yeah.
I mean, the U.S. Marines were born off of the Royal Marines. The example of the Royal Marines, they were tough as nails. So, but we've got to find a way. We've got to have to think in terms of examples from history that can fortify us and show us how to proceed, because the Black Lives Matter movement is predicated on stupidity of people dumb enough to accept their proposals, and weakness, and white guilt. There's just no reason for it. And I think it's being used and infiltrated by Marxists.
It is a Marxist movement
to destroy Western civilization.
There's no doubt about that. A lot of the people are quite open about it. They openly talk about dialectics. They are Marxists. And
so you think this is all? You think this is all part of it? This is all planned out, right?
Yeah, they want to revolutionize society.
Do you believe it's all planned out?
Capitalism. They want to defund the police. They want a Marxist society.
Right. So, but their end game is basically enslaving whites, subjugation, South Africa, murder and torture of whites.
I think they simply want what they think white people have got. I think the idea is that they look around them and they see that a lot of white people, a lot of the professions, doctors, architects, barristers and so on, judges, they're all white, and most rich people are white. And they think, well, why can't we have that? So they just want what's there, what we've got. They're not thinking about what it took to get to that point. They're not thinking about the work or the culture or anything like that. They simply want immediately what white people have got, and they will trash things to get it.
Right. Well, you know something, not all. I mean, I do think it's a family issue. There's such a high level in the United States, at least, of black fatherlessness, not having
Yeah.
a black father,
Mm.
and learning self-control and discipline, which brings me to my next topic that you've explored, which is the challenge of deferred gratification. Simon, tell us about that. There was a study done recently, a gramophone study or something, whereby.
Yeah, it was
Tell us about that.
in 1972. Some black and white researchers went to a school and they spoke to 12 and 13-year-old students, pupils at the school, and they filled out a questionnaire, and then they offered as a reward either 145 disc, an old gramophone disc, a single with one song.
Wait, Simon, wait, help us, because Americans, this is for American audience largely. What is a gramophone?
Record player,
Something
stereo.
about it.
What we now call a stereo, a phonograph.
Right.
A disc where you have the vinyl disc, and they offered them one immediately, or if they waited until the researchers came back in 3 weeks, then they could have three. And nearly all white kids chose to wait 3 weeks and get three records, and hardly any of the black kids did. They wanted something immediately. They would rather have one disc now rather than wait for it. And that's really
right.
important.
So in other words,
because the whole of our achievements in Western society are based upon deferred gratification. Rather than hanging around with our friends when we're 17, it's a matter of studying at school and doing the homework, going to university and being poor or getting into debt. You defer the gratification, and then later on you might become an architect, later on you might become a surgeon. But it doesn't seem something that a lot of black people want to do. They want things immediately.
well, I mean, I think this, in fairness to them, we do have a burgeoning black middle class. I think the statistics are about something like 8% of blacks have become de facto millionaires. With whites, it's higher. With Asians, it's much, much higher. With Hispanics, it's higher. But I guess it all comes back to the question of how they're brought up and if they're brought up. And there's some interesting stories about black success when things were really, really difficult, but their families were intact. When families are not intact, kids do really badly. And I think what we're seeing now is there's no father at home. Mothers are becoming mothers before they get married. So there's no commitment to the idea of the family itself. And they have multiple boyfriends and multiple children. So their first child has multiple siblings from multiple fathers. So out of the gate, you have this idea of a family that's fragmented, and basically compromised from a standpoint of being able to learn and acquire virtues. It's all about virtues.
Which is why the Chinese and Indian families actually do better than anybody else. They do better than white people. Chinese and Indian families tend to get married and live as a standard family unit and impose discipline upon their children. And that's why in Britain, Indians become doctors and surgeons and lawyers, and black people don't. And I'm fairly sure in America, it's people of East Asian origin, isn't it, that tend to get on.
Well, no, we have exceptions. There's always exceptions to this. Somebody like Ben Carson, who had a mother, but didn't have a father, but the mother, even though she was uneducated, knew it was important to get an education and insisted that the kids get an education, and insisted during summer vacations that the kids would read books and learn how to write book reports and use their brains. And so Ben Carson became, a surgeon that separated co-joined twins from the head. I mean, amazing surgery. And his brother got a master's degree in mechanical engineering. And so, people became successful. Now, this is something that's not taught enough and hammered home enough. How has the reception been to your writings, your YouTube videos, Have you been banned? Have you been deplatformed? Because you talk about all these controversial things like working hard, kind of like assures you of success. So, what has been the pushback that you've gotten, if any, from our friends in the UK?
Okay, ordinary people agree with what I'm saying. Left-wing liberal types don't, and they denounce me as a racist and complain to YouTube about me. I've been banned on YouTube a number of times for either what they call hate speech or medical misinformation. For example, one video on YouTube, I happened to mention that there is a difference in brain size and the proportions of the skull in Caucasians and people of African origin. The proportions of the skull differ. And I was banned for hate speech because, according to YouTube policies, you cannot discuss the size or shape of brain skulls of humans. It's racist. It's
Goodness
hate speech
gracious!
automatically.
Wow. Okay, so no, you don't get monetized on YouTube anymore, do you? Or do you?
It depends what mood YouTube are in that day. I'm not
But so,
popular with them. There are some people that complain about
so no, have they demonetized you?
Sorry? Yeah, they demonetise me. There are some people that complain about me every day, and they boast of this on Twitter. Every video I put up, they complain to YouTube and try and get me to be banned. And I think YouTube gets sick and tired of getting all these complaints.
So are you? So let me ask you a question, Simon. Are you on Rumble?
On what's that?
Ah, ha ha. We shall show you this interview. I predict will go very, very well. We have to say a few controversial things. Um, so you know, the knife epidemic, the knifing epidemic in the UK. Tell us about that, and if you can, a little bit. What's going on? For the most part, it's hard to get a firearm, huh?
It's not hard to get firearms for criminals. No, it's hard for law-abiding people to get firearms. And there have
That's a
been
good
various
point.
laws passed. At one time, people could join gun clubs in the UK and fire pistols, on a range. They can't do that anymore. The whole thing is illegal. But there's no problem with
Really?
yeah, yeah. You can't do pistol shooting anymore in Britain.
Hunting?
With shotguns, you can hunt, yes, but you need a license for those, and they're very difficult to get. The only people that have guns in Britain are the criminals, and they're
Right.
more.
So then,
It's the black gangs that actually have the guns, and the black gangs that stab each other. If you look occasionally in newspaper,
right. So we now see we now have a situation where in the UK, we're seeing a rise in knifings, right? People being attacked with knives and killed with knives.
yes, that's absolutely right. It's something that never happened in Britain 50 years ago, say, when Britain was a homogenous society. A knifing, someone being stabbed would be front page news. It was a terrible thing to happen, and you would know all about it. These days, it happens frequently. It's nearly all black people killing black people. So if Black Lives Matter, the thing that they might do, black people, young black people aren't being killed by racist police officers in Britain. They're being killed by other black people.
Sure. So then, is it true that in the United Kingdom they're starting to ban steak knives? You have to get a license for a steak knife. Is that
You have to have identification, and a lot of the time, if you go to a shop, you have to show your passport, say, to show who you are and how old you are.
And do they register the knives as a weapon?
Getting hold of knives, ordinary knives now is not an easy business. At one time, I mean, in America too, probably your Boy Scouts used to carry knives. In this country, Boy Scouts had knives at their hip when they went off.
Sure.
No one carries a jackknife anymore. If you're stopped by the police and you're carrying a jackknife, you're in trouble. You'll end up in court.
You'll end up in court. So then, in other words, if I've got like a Swiss Army knife, with the screwdriver and the corkscrew and all that.
If the police catch you with it in the street, they will arrest you and confiscate the knife.
And so will you go to jail for 30 days, or what's the penalty?
It depends what mood the police are in. It's certainly an offence to carry a knife in public, even the Swiss Army knife.
Wow. So then, This is amazing, man. So in other words, like you can get butter knives, they're okay, but a steak knife is illegal,
Anything
to buy, or at least
sharp.
to have it on your person, I guess. I guess if Mr. Bean goes out in a video and has a picnic, one of his videos, and he pulls out a steak knife as he cuts a piece of ham, they can probably sue the film production company for using a lethal weapon. Yeah, what have we come to, huh? So Simon, there's got to be some sort of a way to deal with this, and it's something that needs to be worked out because the once great nation of Britain, which is still great, but boy, it's coming down. It's like America, has got to be resurrected, and I just don't think it's going to happen when we have a country like yours where you have people in Birmingham where you have a family consisting of 3 or 4 wives and one man and 15 children.
Yeah,
It's
that's
just not.
right.
Britain is going the way of the dodo bird.
Yeah, but the
It's all
enemy is within. It was one thing during the Second World War when we were fighting an external enemy that unified the nation, but the enemy is now within. The country
right.
itself has become fragmented.
So the way it works is that anybody from the Commonwealth can just go home to Britain, can't he or she?
Yeah. That's
No
how
restriction?
No. That's how the Caribbeans and the Africans arrived. Yeah.
Right. So then, have you been threatened, by the way? Because you're opposed to that, aren't you? You're opposed to unlimited immigration, right?
I'm opposed to unlimited immigration. So yeah, I've had threatening emails, but there we are. I mean, I'm so old, it doesn't really affect me anymore.
But wait, Simon. So you're being threatened?
I've certainly had threatening emails, yeah.
Right. Right. Okay. So your views on immigration is you're totally opposed right now, or you're in
I'm
favor of
opposed to
deportation?
I'm opposed to unrestricted immigration, yes, very much so.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, all I can say is that demography predicts the future. And right now, probably even in the United States, one of the most common birth names is Muhammad, right? Aisha, names like that, probably the same in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, it is the same.
Muhammad and different versions of Muhammad.
Mohammed is probably the most common Christian name now. Different spellings of it. Yes, it's more common than John, certainly.
Well, okay. Well, folks, the book that you have to get, you see it right below, is the Forgotten Slave Trade, the White European Slaves of Islam. You've also got some other interesting books. Fighting for the United States, executed in Britain. About 18 Americans were actually executed in the United Kingdom, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Goodness gracious. These are things that you only get when you listen to Simon Webb. Okay, folks, get that book again. We'll put a link up. His website again is www.simon-webb.com. Simon Webb, thank you for being on the Knock Report News Update. Godspeed to you.
All
God
right.
save Britain, and
nice to be on.
Good. It's good talking to you. All right.
All right. Take care now. Yeah. Bye.
Thanks so much, Simon. Bye-bye.
Bye.